Hi, I'm Dr. Keith Graham from the School of Teacher Education at National Taiwan Normal University.
Hi, 我是 Dr. Graham 的助理怡轩 and he will call me Callista.
Sometimes when bilingual teachers start a class, they may want to say, it's time for something class. But recently I got a teacher who asked me a question. What do I call my class? So today, Callista is going to name some classes, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on what to call them. All right, let's get started.
Okay, so we will start with elementary school. So first one, 数学.
So I've seen in many cases that it has been written to call this class mathematics. In the US, we simply just call it math. Now, in British English, they tend to call it maths with an S. I think either one of those would be more appropriate than calling it mathematics class. All right, what's next?
Okay, so next is 生活课程.
So often this is directly translated as life curriculum. But I think to keep things simple, because remember, many of our learners are at the beginning stages of learning English, we can just call it simply life class. All right, next.
Okay, so next one is 社会.
Most people will call this social studies, and I think that is the appropriate term for that.
Okay, so next one is 自然科学.
So if we directly translate this one, it'll be natural sciences. But I don't think we need to get into that many details. We can just say it's time for science class.
Okay, and next one, my favorite, 艺术.
I've seen many different translations of this. I would tend to just say, call it art class. So it's time for art class.
Okay, so next one, 综合活动.
This one is going to be the most complicated one. Typically, when we translate this, it's integrative activities, but that is really long, and so I don't think that's a good name. Alternatively, you could just say it's activities class. I think that would probably be the simplest.
Okay, so the last one in elementary is 健康语体.
Yeah, so these are typically taught as separate classes. So when we talk about the first one, we will say health. For the second one, you'll often see it written as physical education, but nobody, just like with mathematics, nobody uses that full name. So what we will call it is just PE class. It's time for health class, or it's time for PE class. All right, let's move on to junior high school. And names that we've already done, we're not going to cover again. So we're going to only talk about classes that are unique to junior high school.
Okay, so the first one is 历史.
All right, so this is simply history class.
Okay, so and 地理.
And this one, just like it would be translated, geography class.
Okay, and next one is complicated. 公民与社会.
Yeah, so if we translate this directly, it would be civics and society. But that's a really long name. So I think we have a couple choices here. First, we could just adopt the name that we had in elementary school for social studies, because typically when I was in school in the US, we would call that class a social studies class. Alternatively, instead of calling it civics and society, we just simply say it's civics class.
Okay, so the next one is 理化.
So this one's an interesting one because in junior high school, this class has a little bit of physics and it has a little bit of chemistry. I think because it is involving many different types of sciences, we can just, again, adopt what we did in primary or elementary school and just say it's time for science class.
And next one is 生物.
So this one is translated to biology class.
Okay, and next one is 地球科学.
So this one we would just call earth science.
Okay, and then next one is 音乐.
That is music class.
Okay, and then 视觉艺术.
If we translate it out, it would be visual arts class. But I think simply calling it art class is sufficient enough. So we can just say it's time for art class.
Okay, and next one, 表演艺术.
Here in Taiwan, it's very typical that they use the term performing arts class. So it's time for performing arts class.
Okay, and 家政.
This is home economics. In the US, we would often use a shorthand like home ec, but I don't think that would be appropriate in Taiwan. So just saying it's time for home economics class, I think is good enough.
And next one, 童军.
This is called scouting class.
Okay, and 辅导.
So it's typically translated as guidance class. I don't think we should necessarily change that, but I think if I were to make the decision, I think saying something like it's time for life skills class probably would be more appropriate. But for the sake of consistency across Taiwan, since guidance is often used as the translation of this. I think it's best to say it's time for guidance class.
Okay, and a new one, 资讯科技.
This is often translated as information technology class. I think we have a couple options here. We can keep it simple, just call it computer class. Alternatively, we could call it IT class. I think either it's time for IT class or it's time for computer class would be just fine.
Okay. 然后最后一个生活科技.
Most of the English handbooks that have been created in Taiwan call this living technology class, so I say we go with that. That's all for this episode. If you have a question about this video, for example, you want to know a name for another class that we didn't cover today, send me an email at kmgraham@ntnu.edu.tw. I'll see you next time.